All right, time for another update and forecast on the Shelly fire. If you're looking for the lake fire update, that's on my channel. I'm doing that video separately today just because there's so many different things going on. Now, one piece of good news is there actually wasn't that much going on the Shelly fire yesterday in terms of new fire growth. There was a lot going on in terms of work being done on this fire. There's a ton of resources that we'll be looking at. First thing I just want to do though is show the difference between the fire perimeter today and the fire perimeter yesterday, where you kind of have to look closely because there's not that big of a difference. It looks like we saw less growth on this western edge that had been one of the more active areas recently, only just a tiny little sliver there. And then the most active area of the fire over the last couple of days has been this eastern side. And probably should just get our bearings here real quick just so we know where we are. There's Greenview, and then as we get closer to the fire, there's the Kidder Creek Adventure Camp, and then when we're looking up into this kind of canyon right here, that's where the fire has been most active recently, is on this eastern side of the fire. For example, if I turn off yesterday and the day before, you could see how it moved down the hill. Fire does move more slowly downhill, but it does look like we have enough dry fuel in this area, fuel that hasn't been burned in decades and very hot, dry conditions. So yeah, we did have some growth 2 days ago, and then the growth yesterday is going to be this right there. So it was definitely still active. We definitely still had some growth, but you notice as it's been pushing down the hill, it's moving a lot less quickly than when it was going up the hill, which is exactly what you'd expect with fire behavior. Because when a fire is going up a hill, it's able to preheat the fuels above it, and then by the time the fire gets to those fuels, all the moisture has already been evaporated out of them, so then they can just burst into flames. Whereas when you're going downhill, the fuels aren't being preheated, so the fire has to use some of its energy to take that moisture out of the fuels before they can combust. Now, with that being said, yeah, we did still see some growth over there. Notice on the kind of northern side of the fire, we haven't seen it come down this side. That was originally where there was some concern that it would be able to make its way slowly down here, more so during like the overnight hours when you usually get hills going downslope. And then it would be able to establish down here and then just take off up this side of the canyon, but they've done a great job of keeping it kind of pretty well contained on that side. So just one more view. We'll orient ourselves back north just to see the difference between today and yesterday. Yeah, it looks like, or yesterday and the day before that. So yeah, northeastern side of the fire, we did have some growth. So it is now up to 9,234 acres. It shows 0% containment, but sometimes that number can be misleading because, I mean, if you look at all the work that they've done on this fire, I mean, it's technically 0% containment, but we have a lot of lines in here now. So there's our fire perimeter. And then when we zoom in here, anywhere where you see those X's, that's where they've, that's where they've put in some dozer lines. And it's on the area of the fire that is closest to the largest amount of structures that they've put in the largest amount of dozer lines. You can see that it's not just one as well. You have dozer line right there, and then just in case maybe winds were to take up a burning ember, put it over the dozer line, there's another backup. And then you got multiple over here. And it does look like they have put some dozer line on that ridge, which is, dozer line up there. Although that shows H, which I believe stands for hand line. Yeah, completed hand line is going to be where you see the H right there, and then the dozer line is going to be where we have the X's. So that actually explains why it wasn't able to push down that canyon, is because they put in some good work up there. So yeah, technically 0% containment. You're not seeing any black on the perimeter here, but there's a lot of fuel that's been cleared out between the fire and our structures. So that's, I'd say, good news right there. And then in terms of the CAL FIRE numbers, I didn't pull this up, but I do actually just want to see how many resources we have on this fire. So Shelly fire, coming into incidents. Looks like it's pretty smoky out there right now. We'll see if the inversion lifts today. That's where your fire activity would start to pick up a bit more, but we have been getting a lot of help from those smoke inversions as well. Personnel, though, 2,557 dozers, so those numbers just keep going up every single time I check them. That's why I like checking them. And so that makes sense why we haven't seen as much growth as there probably should have been on this fire, given the terrain, given how dry the fuels are, given the fact that when we look at fire history, there's a large portion of the area around this fire that has really no fire history. You look at especially that eastern side of the fire that's been more active recently, those are fuels that haven't burned in over 50 years. So the fact that it's been every side of the fire behavior triangle, hot or weather, fuel, topography, and then within weather it's been hot and dry. So they've been doing a great job here. Right now it does look like there's more activity on that western side of the fire, but it's a little hard to tell exactly what's going on. I don't imagine that it's actually extended that far. I think that, if anything, that might be some error with the satellite data. But I do just want to continue to show this map to show where our structures are compared to where some of the recent heat has been, where you see those red stars. And then, yeah, so we do still have structures threatened. There are still some evacuation orders and warnings in place. You can see those on the CAL FIRE website, or the Watch Duty website is also pretty good as well for that kind of information. So definitely still seeing some activity right now, but they've done a great job on it. I think the big question mark is what's going to be happening over the next few days, and what determines that in large part is going to be what the weather does, and there are kind of some curveballs in the weather forecast. So we'll just come in here. I wasn't able to highlight stuff, but I kind of remember the things that I want to point out. Weather, hot, dry, and unstable. That's kind of how it's been. So our temperatures, mid-80s along the ridges, upper 90s in the valleys, 14 to 17% minimum relative humidity in the valleys, 18 to 20% along the ridges. So it's hot, it's dry. The one thing working in our favor is it's not that windy. It says in Scott Valley we could see some gusts up to 20 miles per hour mid-afternoon. But, I mean, we'd take that over 30 to 40 mile per hour winds. And in some of these areas, it's just around 15 to 18 with localized gusts up to 25. So I'd say the bigger factor on this fire is how dry the fuels are and the steep, rugged terrain. And then Thursday night, let's see, maximum relative humidity, around 40 to 45% slope. So that's actually a bit more moisture than we have seen recently. That would actually work to help us out. But it's in the long range forecast where I think the weather becomes a lot more of a wild card, you could say. Friday says it's a few degrees warmer. That's probably not going to impact things too much. Still going to be hot and dry. We've basically been dealing with that the entire time. But it's the outlook for Saturday and Sunday where things get a bit more interesting. That's because moisture is going to be moving in, and it's creating the isolated thunderstorm chances. So extend with isolated dry thunderstorms possible on Saturday if enough mid-level moisture reaches the area. And that's kind of the question, if enough mid-level moisture reaches the area. So we can actually check our weather maps here. Coming over here, see all that dry air that's over Northern California right now? Watch what happens as we get into the weekend. You're going to see that moisture rush up from the south, and that's where our thunderstorm chances are going to be coming from. We can click through Saturday. That's where the thunderstorm chances appear to be the highest. Looks like there's definitely some chances in the Sierra and then parts of Southern California. Might have to think about that for the lake fire potentially. But bit of a question mark if it's able to actually make it all the way west to where our fire is, because right now it looks like it's mostly on the very eastern portions of the state and up in the Sierra. So what would happen with thunderstorms? It can be a mixed bag with wildfires. I've seen it where thunderstorms bring in rain and it actually helps with our fire behavior. More often than not, though, it does lead to some gusty, erratic winds, which can push the fire in different directions. And then, obviously, with thunderstorms, you can have lightning starting new fires. So that's something I'll definitely be watching closely over the next couple of days. But overall, even though we have seen some growth on the Shelly fire recently, up over 9,000 acres now, and still technically 0% containment, they've done a lot of good work between the fire and the communities. I imagine they'll continue to do some good work over the next couple of days, and then we'll just have to wait and see exactly what happens with those thunderstorm chances coming up this weekend. So I'll continue to update you guys as new information comes in. Hopefully this video is helpful, and thanks for watching.